The transition is never a rupture. It is a slow cellular erosion that occurs while we are looking at something else. We imagine our lives as a linear progression of choices, yet the most profound transformations happen in the spaces between our intentions. We carry names and histories like inherited garments that no longer fit the frame, yet we refuse to acknowledge the tightening at the seams. It is a quiet, persistent displacement. We are inhabited by a stranger who uses our voice and walks in our shoes, navigating a world built for a person who ceased to exist years ago. We do not notice the moment the inhabitant changes, only the faint, inexplicable discomfort of living in a shape that was designed for a different version of the soul. We maintain the rituals of a ghost. Every morning, we perform the small mechanical tasks that once held deep significance for a version of ourselves we can no longer quite recall. The preference for a specific silence, the way we hold a pen, the instinctual path we take through a familiar landscape. These are all echoes of a previous tenant. We are stewards of a museum dedicated to a person who left without saying goodbye. The tension lies not in the change itself, but in the seamless way the new self adopts the old self's biography. We claim memories that belong to someone else, asserting ownership over a past that feels increasingly like a film we once watched but did not actually inhabit. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from maintaining a continuity that is no longer there. We exert a tremendous, unconscious effort to bridge the gap between who we are expected to be and the unfamiliar entity we have become. This is the ritual of the mask, performed so consistently that the skin beneath begins to forget its own texture. We speak the language of our younger selves with a borrowed fluency, reciting opinions we no longer hold and desires that have long since gone cold. The ritual is not for our benefit, but to keep the world from noticing the vacancy. We are terrified that if we stop the performance, the silence that follows will reveal how little of the original structure remains. The shift is often found in the things that no longer hurt. We look back at the agonies that once defined us, the heartbreaks that felt like terminal illnesses, the failures that seemed like permanent stains, and we find that they have become inert. They are artifacts in a glass case, observed with a detached clinical curiosity. This lack of resonance is the clearest evidence of our departure. To no longer be wounded by the same things is to no longer be the person who is capable of feeling them. We have outgrown the capacity for those specific pains, and in doing so, we have lost the person who was defined by them. We stand on the far shore of our own history, unable to swim back to the wreckage. Time does not move through us. It moves over us, like water over stone, smoothing away the sharp edges of our original intent until we are unrecognizable to the hands that first shaped us. We become a collection of habits and reactions that have been refined by years of quiet attrition. The person who dreamed certain dreams has been replaced by a person who merely manages the consequences of those dreams. It is a slow, methodical replacement of parts, a ship of Theseus built of flesh and memory. By the time the last original plank is gone, we are still sailing under the same name, toward a destination that was chosen by someone we would now find entirely exhausting to talk to. We find ourselves in conversations where we are forced to represent a version of ourselves that has been dead for a decade. Old friends and family members hold up mirrors that reflect a face we no longer recognize, insisting on a personality that has since evaporated. We provide the expected responses, playing the part with a weary precision. There is a deep, psychological friction in being pinned to a specific point in time by the expectations of others. We are forced to inhabit the architecture of our past, lingering in rooms where the air has grown thin and the light has changed. We smile and nod, while internally we are drifting further away into a landscape they cannot see. The weight of the unnoticed change is most heavy during moments of absolute stillness. When the distractions of the day fall away, we are left with the sensation of being an interloper in our own lives. The furniture, our existence, the career, the relationships, the daily routines, all feel like they were selected by a stranger. We look at the trajectory of our decisions and realize the person who made them was operating on a logic that is now foreign to us. There is no anger in this realization, only a cold, quiet curiosity. We are living out the remainder of a contract signed by a previous version of ourselves, bound by the momentum of a life we no longer feel qualified to lead. We become experts at ignoring the discrepancies. When a thought arises that doesn't fit the established narrative of who we are, we suppress it with a practiced efficiency. We tell ourselves that we are consistent, that we are growing, that we are evolving. But evolution implies a connection to the origin that we have long since severed. This is not growth. It is a quiet, total replacement. The unease persists in the periphery of our vision, a flickering realization that the person staring back from the reflective surface of a darkened screen is a stranger wearing our skin. We look for a spark of recognition, a sign that the original inhabitant is still there, but find only the smooth, impenetrable surface of the present. Memory functions as a form of creative fiction, rewriting the past to accommodate the stranger we have become. We convince ourselves that we have always felt this way, that our current indifference was always there in embryonic form. We sanitize the radical shifts of our identity to avoid the vertigo of realizing how much we have lost. The drift is so constant and so slow that we lack a fixed point for measurement. We are like travelers on a vast, featureless ocean, moving at a speed that feels like standing still, only realizing how far we have gone when the stars above us are no longer the ones we were taught to name. The silence between our words grows longer as we realize how little of our internal landscape is communicable to those who knew us then. We stop trying to explain the shift because there is no language for a change that left no scars. There was no trauma to mark the departure, no ceremony to celebrate the arrival. There is only the gradual accumulation of new silences. We move through our social circles like ghosts in a familiar house, touching objects that once belonged to us but no longer carry our heat. We are present in body, but the psychic center has migrated to a place that has no address, leaving the shell to continue the conversation. There is a subtle horror in the realization that we do not miss the person we used to be. The lack of grief is perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the transition. We should mourn the loss of that intensity, that specific brand of hope, or that particular way of seeing the world. But we find only a vast, neutral emptiness. The old self has been discarded like a piece of plastic packaging. Functional once, but now merely an obstacle to the contents. This indifference confirms the finality of the replacement. We are not the sum of our parts. We are the result of their continuous shedding. We are the emptiness left behind by 1,000 departed versions of ourselves. We continue to inhabit the geography of our past, walking streets that hold no meaning for the current occupant. The landmarks of our youth, the corners where we felt the first stings of rejection, or the parks where we felt the rush of absolute clarity, are now just coordinates in a city. The emotional resonance has leaked out of the pavement. We are tourists in our own biography, reading the commemorative plaques with a sense of polite distance. The person who experienced those things is gone, and they took the key to the emotional archive with them. We are left with the cold facts of a life we can no longer feel from the inside. Identity is a ghost story we tell ourselves to maintain the illusion of permanence. We cling to the idea of a true self as if there is a bedrock beneath the shifting sands of our personality. But as we outgrow our desires, our fears, and our convictions, we find that there is no core, only a series of layers, each one replacing the last until the original is buried beyond retrieval. The tension arises when we try to dig back down, looking for a foundation that was never there to begin with. We find only more sand, more shifts, and the unsettling realization that we are a process of disappearance, not a solid entity. We observe the younger versions of others with a mixture of pity and alienation, recognizing in them the same frantic clinging to an identity that we once practiced. We see the gears of their self-construction grinding away, building monuments to a person who will be gone by the next decade. There is a desire to warn them about the coming erosion, to tell them that the things they are fighting for will one day be the things they cannot remember the names of. But we remain silent, knowing that the realization must be experienced as a slow, solitary fading. We watch them live inside their temporary shapes, knowing how soon the air will change and the walls will begin to thin. The broader perspective reveals a world populated by these unrecognizable survivors. We are a society of strangers, living in the ruins of our own histories, interacting with one another through the medium of our former selves. We trade stories about people who no longer exist, upholding the social contract of continuity, because the alternative is a terrifying anonymity. If we all admitted that we are not the people we claim to be, the entire structure of our shared reality would collapse. So we maintain the fiction, nodding at the mentions of our past as if we were actually there, while the stranger inside us looks on with cold, detached eyes. The decisions we make now are filtered through a wisdom that is actually just a form of accumulated fatigue. We call it maturity, but it is often just the inability to inhabit the same intensity we once possessed. We have outgrown the energy required for certain kinds of conflict and certain kinds of love. This retreat is not a choice, but a biological necessity. The new self simply lacks the hardware to run the old software. We move with a measured, economical gait, avoiding the psychic expenditures that once defined our days. We are more efficient, perhaps, but we are also more hollow, operating on a reduced power setting to preserve the remaining structure. We look at old photographs and feel a sense of profound trespassing. The person in the image possesses a gaze we can no longer replicate, a confidence or a vulnerability that has been entirely scrubbed from our current repertoire. It feels wrong to claim that image as our own. We are stealing the likeness of a dead person to justify our own presence in the world. The photo is a record of a disappearance, a piece of evidence documenting the exact moment before the light began to fail. We close the album not because we are finished looking, but because the distance between the image and the observer has become too vast to bridge without a sense of vertigo. The final stages of outgrowing a life are marked by a total lack of ceremony. There is no climax, no grand revelation, only the quiet closing of a door we didn't know we were standing near. We look around and realize that the things we once thought were essential have become optional, then irrelevant, then forgotten. The weight of the change is not a burden we carry, but a gravity we have finally stopped fighting. We settle into the new, unrecognizable shape with a heavy, resigned comfort. The struggle to remain who we were has finally ended, not with a victory, but with a silent, total surrender to the current of time. We are left living in the negative space of our former selves. The house is the same, the name is the same, but the internal atmosphere has undergone a chemical shift that makes everything taste slightly of salt and metal. We wait for a sense of resolution that never arrives. There is no new you to celebrate, only the absence of the old you. We are a collection of echoes bouncing off the walls of a life that was built for someone else. The tension remains because we are still looking for a way to reconcile the two, seeking a bridge between the ghost and the inhabitant that will never be built. In the end, we do not move on. We simply fade out of one frequency and into another. The person we were is still there, in a sense, inhabiting the memories of others and the physical artifacts we have left behind. But they are no longer accessible to us. We are the survivors of our own obsolescence. We sit in the quiet of the present, listening to the sound of our own breathing, wondering how many more versions of ourselves will have to disappear before the story finally runs out of pages. The silence is not peaceful. It is merely patient, waiting for the next slow, unnoticed replacement to begin its work.